Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Being an army kid meant moving around constantly. By the time I was 8, we'd already packed up and moved at least 4 times that I could remember. My dad was stationed all over with the British Army, Germany, Switzerland, Cyprus, you name it. Sometimes the whole family would come along for the ride, sometimes we'd stay behind. It was just the way things were. My sister hated it more than I did. She was always the one making friends easily, only to have to say goodbye a few months or years later. I just got used to the idea that nothing was permanent, until my dad retired from the army when I was about 8 years old. That's when everything changed. We moved from the army barracks to a completely different county, and this time it was supposed to be for good. The Ministry of Defense had provided us with an old soldier's quarter in a quiet neighborhood. It was meant to be our forever home, no more packing boxes, no more goodbyes. The house was different from anything we'd lived in before. It had a proper dining room separate from the kitchen and living room, which seemed incredibly fancy to me at the time. After years of cramped quarters and temporary housing, having actual space felt like luxury. About 6 months after we'd settled in, my parents decided to have a big dinner party. They invited our grandparents and 3 sets of family friends over. The driveway was packed with cars, and the house was buzzing with conversation and laughter. It was the kind of evening that made the house feel like a real home. We were all sitting around the dining room table when my dad suddenly stopped mid-conversation. His face went from relaxed to shocked in about 2 seconds flat. He was staring out the window toward our back garden. Following his gaze, I saw something that didn't make sense. There was a woman wandering around our garden like she owned the place. She was examining the flower beds, peering through windows, and generally behaving like someone viewing a house they were thinking of buying. The weird part was that to get to our back garden, she would have had to unlock and open 3 separate gates. My dad, being the no-nonsense retired army man he was, wasn't about to let this slide. He grabbed 2 of his mates who were there for dinner, both ex-army rugby types who looked like they could handle themselves in any situation. The 3 of them walked outside to confront the woman. Those of us, still in the dining room, crowded around the window to watch what was happening. My dad demanded to know what the woman thought she was doing on his property. The woman looked up from the roses she'd been inspecting with complete calm and simply told him she was looking at the garden. His mate pointed out that they could see that much, but wanted to know why she was there. My dad got more direct, telling her this was his house and demanding she get off his property. He wanted to know who she thought she was. Karen just shrugged like this was the most normal conversation in the world. She explained that her son was going to buy this house, that she wanted it, and she wanted to see what she could do with the garden when he bought it. I could see my dad's confusion turning into anger, even from inside the house. He asked what she meant by when her son buys it, pointing out that the house wasn't for sale and that he lived there. Karen calmly told him that no, he didn't live there. Her son wanted to buy this house. That's when his 2 mates decided they'd better check on the families inside and call the police. They came back in and told everyone to make sure all the kids stayed inside while this got sorted out. My dad ordered the woman to get off his property immediately, but this woman was completely unfazed by his anger. She insisted it wasn't his property at all, it was hers, and she lived there. By this point, we'd opened the dining room window so we could hear everything clearly. My mother had been trying to stay calm, but hearing this woman claim our house was hers while we had a house full of guests and children sent her over the edge. She stormed out the back door in full protective mode. She yelled at the woman to get off her property and to get away from her husband. My dad tried to calm her down, telling her it was okay and that she should go inside while he got rid of the intruder. But my mom wasn't having any of it. She was absolutely livid that this stranger was not only trespassing, but claiming our home as her own, while our friends and family were right there witnessing it. Then the woman made the biggest mistake she could have made. She called my mother a crazy witch. That was it. My dad had to physically hold my mom back from going after this woman. I'd never seen my mother so angry in my life. Meanwhile, the police had been called and arrived pretty quickly. They immediately began escorting the woman off our property. One of the officers suggested that my dad should invest in better locks for the gates, which only made him more frustrated. He had to explain to them that she'd already had to unlock several gates to get back there in the first place. When the police officers walked the woman toward their car, she was still insisting on her ridiculous story. She declared that she was going to get us out of her house because it was her son's house and she lived there. My dad had heard enough. He told the police officers that he wanted to press charges against her for trespassing. That's when the woman's entire attitude changed. Suddenly, she wasn't the confident homeowner anymore. She started backpedaling frantically, claiming she didn't mean any of it and that she was very sorry. The transformation was incredible. One minute she was claiming our house was hers. The next she was practically begging for forgiveness. But the police officers had dealt with people like this before. The officer told her that whether charges were pressed was up to my dad. They put her in the police car and drove away, leaving us all standing in our garden, trying to process what had just happened. The audacity of this woman was something none of us had ever experienced before. The dinner party continued, but it became the main topic of conversation for the rest of the evening. Our guests couldn't believe that someone would be so bold as to not only trespass, but to actually claim they lived in our house while we were clearly home with a house full of people. My dad did end up pressing charges. A few weeks later, we found out that the woman had been doing this to several houses in the neighborhood, apparently convinced that any house she liked should belong to her son. She received a restraining order and had to pay a fine. The satisfying part came about a month later when we got a letter from her son. He was mortified by his mother's behavior and wanted to apologize personally. Apparently, he'd been looking at houses in the area months earlier, but had never even seen our house, let alone expressed interest in buying it. His mother had taken it upon herself to scout properties for him without his knowledge. He also mentioned that this wasn't the first time she'd done something like this, and he was looking into getting her some help. The letter was genuinely apologetic and embarrassed, which made us realize that the woman probably had some serious issues that went beyond just being entitled. I was a spoiled kid, I'll admit it. My parents made decent money and they loved buying me the latest gaming systems. By the time I was 12, I had pretty much every console you could think of. Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox, even some of the obscure ones like the Sega Saturn. My room looked like a mini GameStop. My cousin wasn't so lucky. His family struggled financially, and while they weren't poor, there definitely wasn't money for multiple gaming systems. Whenever he came over to visit, which was pretty often since our families were close, I'd let him play on my consoles. We'd spend hours together beating games and having fun. But when it came to letting him borrow anything to take home, not a chance. I was way too protective of my stuff. Those consoles were my babies, and the thought of them leaving my house made me anxious. My uncle always gave me grief about this. He'd make comments about how I should share more, how my cousin deserved to enjoy these things too. At the time, I just brushed it off. Years passed, and we both grew up. My cousin got a good job right out of college and started building his own gaming collection. What really impressed me was that he'd gotten into collecting retro games and systems. He had some rare stuff that I'd never even heard of. Meanwhile, I kept all my old consoles stored away, telling myself I'd pass them down to my future kids someday. When my cousin found out I still had all those old systems, he offered to buy some from me. The prices he quoted were actually pretty generous. Apparently, some of my stuff had become quite valuable, but I turned him down. Those consoles represented my childhood memories. I wanted to keep them intact, maybe let my own kids experience the joy of playing classic games at their original sluggish frame rates. My uncle didn't like my decision one bit. Every family gathering became an opportunity for him to lecture me about how selfish I was being. He'd bring up how I'd never let my cousin borrow anything when we were kids, and how now I had a chance to make things right by selling or giving him some of my collection. According to my uncle, I owed it to my cousin because of how I'd acted when we were younger. He would tell me I'd been hoarding those games for years, and that my cousin had shown real passion for collecting while I was just keeping them locked away in storage. When I'd respond that they were mine and I wanted to keep them, He'd insisted wasn't fair and that I was denying my cousin again, just like when we were kids. This went on for months. Every phone call, every visit, he'd find a way to bring it up. My cousin, to his credit, had stopped asking about it entirely. He seemed to understand my position and had moved on to building his collection through other means. In late 2022, I finally moved into my own apartment. It felt amazing to have my own space, though I had to put most of my gaming collection in a storage unit since my new place was pretty small. My cousin came over for a housewarming visit, and we had a great time just hanging out like old times. Before he left, he handed me a wrapped gift. He told me he wanted to get me something special for my new place. I unwrapped it to find a copy of Majora's Mask for the Nintendo 64. It was our absolute favorite game growing up. We must have beaten it together a dozen times. I thanked him and told him how awesome it was. He said he knew how much that game meant to both of us and figured it belonged with me. My uncle was there when this exchange happened, and I could see the anger building on his face. He didn't say anything at the time, but I could tell he was furious that my cousin was giving me games instead of the other way around. 2 nights later, I was fast asleep when a loud clicking sound jolted me awake. My heart started racing when I heard what sounded like something snapping. I grabbed my phone and quietly called 911, whispering to the dispatcher that I thought someone had broken into my apartment. The dispatcher asked if I was in immediate danger and whether I could see the intruder. I whispered back that I was in my bedroom with the door closed and had heard breaking sounds from my living room. They told me to stay where I was because officers were on their way. I crept to my bedroom door and peered through the crack. In the moonlight streaming through my balcony window, I could see a figure moving around my living room. When my eyes adjusted, I realized with shock that it was my uncle. He was going through my stuff, apparently looking for something specific. I watched when he rifled through my entertainment center and the boxes I hadn't unpacked yet. He moved with purpose, like he knew exactly what he was looking for and felt he had every right to be there. When the police arrived, they found that my uncle had forced open my balcony door using a crowbar. The loud click I'd heard was the lock breaking, and the snap was part of the door frame giving way. One of the officers asked my uncle what he was doing in the apartment. My uncle claimed it was his nephew's place and that he was just checking on some things. The officer questioned why he was doing that at 2 in the morning by breaking in through the balcony. My uncle responded that I had items that rightfully belonged to his son, and he was just retrieving what was theirs. The officers looked at me for confirmation, and I explained the whole situation, how my uncle had been pressuring me for months to give away my gaming collection, and how I'd never given him any permission to enter my apartment. I told the officer I wanted to press charges because my uncle had broken into my home. My uncle insisted I was making a mistake, and that family doesn't do this to family. But before I could follow through, my cousin showed up. Apparently, my uncle had called him after getting arrested, spinning some story about trying to help mediate our dispute. My cousin looked mortified when he realized what had actually happened. He apologized profusely and said he had no idea his father was planning anything like this. I told him it wasn't his fault and that his dad had broken into my apartment. My cousin agreed it was inexcusable, but then he pleaded with me not to press charges. He explained that, with everything their family had been through since the pandemic, he couldn't handle losing his dad too. I looked at my cousin, who'd been nothing but respectful about the whole gaming collection situation, and I felt torn. This wasn't his fault, and he was clearly devastated by his father's actions. I told him I wouldn't press criminal charges, but I was getting a restraining order, and his father would have to pay for my damaged door. The restraining order process was straightforward, and my uncle ended up paying me $430 for the repairs to my balcony door. But I wasn't taking any chances. I ordered security cameras from Amazon and set them up around my apartment. They weren't the fanciest models, but they could send alerts to my phone and record everything. I positioned them carefully so they'd be hard to spot but would catch anyone trying to break in again. A few weeks later, I got a notification on my phone from one of my cameras. Sure enough, there was my uncle standing on my balcony, apparently scoping out my new security setup. He tried the door handle a few times, then noticed one of the cameras pointed right at him. He looked frustrated when he realized he'd been caught on video just being there. When the police showed up again, my uncle told them he wasn't doing anything wrong and was just checking to make sure I was safe. Apparently, violating a restraining order doesn't count as checking on safety. This time, my cousin didn't ask me to go easy on him. My cousin told me he was done making excuses for his father and that I should press charges. My uncle spent 3 days in jail and had to pay additional fines. The judge extended the restraining order for another 2 years and made it clear that any further violations would result in serious jail time. I became a mom in March 2021. It wasn't exactly the motherhood journey I had planned. My daughter was formula fed from day one, which wasn't my original choice, but you know what they say, fed is best. She was thriving, hitting all her milestones, and that's what mattered most to me. After those first few chaotic months of new parenthood, I developed a system that worked for us. I always ordered my daughter's formula in bulk from our local pharmacy, their own brand that was reliable and affordable. I made sure to order online in advance so I wouldn't clear out their shelves and leave other parents scrambling. It seemed like the considerate thing to do. About a month ago, I had placed another bulk order online along with some other essentials we needed. I'd already paid for everything, so when the notification came in that my order was ready for pickup, I was excited. Finally, I could restock our supplies and have peace of mind for the next few weeks. I drove to the pharmacy that afternoon feeling pretty good about having my mom routine down pat. The place was busy, so I grabbed my order from the pickup counter and got in line to double check everything was there. I had 4 boxes of formula in my basket along with the other items I'd ordered. That's when I heard it, this demanding voice behind me asking where I got the formula. I turned around and immediately recognized her. She was someone from my old school days, and honestly, she hadn't changed much. She still had that air of superiority that made everyone uncomfortable back then. She had a baby too and was holding 1 box of the same formula brand I used. I politely explained that I had ordered it online and it was ready for pickup. I tried to keep things friendly, but something in her expression told me this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. She bluntly demanded that I give her 3 of my boxes, explaining that the pharmacy was out of stock and she only had 1 box. I was caught off guard by her directness, but I wanted to be reasonable. I offered to return 2 of the boxes if she'd like to buy them, since I could always order more online for next time. I thought this was a fair compromise. 2 boxes would still last me a while, and she could get what she needed. But she wasn't interested in that solution. She asked why she should have to buy them when I'd already paid for them, and demanded I just give them to her. Now I was really confused. That's not how purchases work. I repeated my offer to return them so she could buy them, or suggested she could place an online order herself since it only takes 3 to 5 days for delivery. She refused and declared that her child deserved it more than mine. She was getting louder now and people were starting to stare. I had no idea what reasoning she was using to justify that statement. Then she claimed she deserved it more because she had a higher position at work than I did. I honestly didn't know how to respond to that. What did job titles have to do with baby formula? I told her that every child deserves what they need and that I was trying to help her by offering to return some boxes. But she wasn't interested in reasonable solutions. She yelled that I should just give them to her, appealing to motherhood solidarity and insisting we should stick together. I simply wished her a nice day and turned back toward the cashier, hoping that would end the conversation. By now, the cashier had called for a manager and another staff member to help with my order. They were really kind people who seemed genuinely concerned about the situation developing in their store. The staff member helped me gather bags to carry my things, and I thought the drama was over. That's when things took a turn I never could have predicted. Without any warning, she grabbed one of my bags that contained formula and just ran. She bolted right out of the store, taking her unpaid basket with her. In her rush to steal my stuff, she dropped her phone on the floor. I was honestly terrified. I'd never had anyone just grab my things and run before. The manager tried to chase after her, but she had already disappeared into the parking lot crowd. Another customer picked up the phone she'd dropped and handed it over. I was shaking a little from the whole experience. The staff member and I loaded my remaining belongings into my car. The manager offered me something to drink, and I really appreciated their kindness during such a bizarre situation. The manager explained that she had the phone, but it was locked, though there were emergency contacts that didn't need unlocking. She called the number listed as her husband and explained what had just happened. From what I could hear of the conversation, he was stunned. About 20 minutes later, a man pulled up looking embarrassed and frustrated. He apologized profusely about the situation and explained that her sense of entitlement had gotten completely out of control since her recent promotion at work. The manager told him that she had stolen from their store and they were filing charges regardless of whether the items were returned. The husband looked shocked. The manager was already putting up warning stickers on the windows and inside the store. About an hour later, the husband returned with her, and there were already police cars in the parking lot. He apologized again, explaining how her arrogance had spiraled since her work promotion. She was arrested right there in the parking lot, and I finally got my stolen bag back. The manager was very clear about what would happen next, explaining that she was banned from the pharmacy permanently. If they needed formula, they could order online or have someone else pick it up for them. The husband thanked the manager for calling him and apologized once more before leaving, clearly ashamed of the whole situation. Even though I got my things back, the pharmacy pressed charges for the theft. A police report was filed, and I gave my statement, though they told me I probably wouldn't hear much about the case going forward. I said I didn't mind, I just wanted it documented. The manager promised to keep me updated on anything important. A few weeks later, I heard she was trying to badmouth me to anyone who would listen, claiming I was selfish and unreasonable. The funny thing is, it wasn't working. Her own behavior had been so outrageous that nobody believed her version of events. Plus, one of our mutual friends had a daughter who worked at that very pharmacy and witnessed the whole thing. She'd already told her mom exactly what happened, so when the rumors started flying, people knew the real story. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.